Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Welcome to Big Blend Radio, everyone. Today's show is all about ecotourism and sustainable travel. And it is World Conservation Strategy Day that is observed every March 6th. And it's really about looking at taking care of nature, conservation of wildlife, the natural world, but also being sustainable in communities across the country and around the world. And that also includes looking at shopping local and supporting small business. So very excited today. We've got some great recordings coming up after this discussion. We've got travel writers Barbara Redding, Joe Clark, Sharon Kurtz, and we also have Glenn Burrows from Norfolk Tours in England on. So we go a little bit around the world in these conversations today. And that's really important because we need to look locally and then act locally when we're traveling globally, if that makes sense. So let's get started. We've got Dan Howard back on the show. He's the VP of Communications at Visit Park City, and that's in Utah. And you can go to visitparkcity.com. So welcome back, Dan. How are you?
Thanks for having me back. This is a perfect day to be talking about it with tourism strategy.
Exactly. The strategy to me, when I saw that, I was like, oh, we got to do this day, because I think it's all about the discussion. It's the tourism entities themselves, the activities, the attractions, CVBs, chambers of commerce, all of that, but also the community should have a voice, right, Dan, when we look at that?
Yes.
When we look at strategy.
If you look at our website, visitparkcity.com, we relaunched it in May 1 last year. And there are only 4 drop downs at the top, and one of them is stewardship. And it's all about encouraging our visitors to practice the 6 steps to sustainable Park City visitation. And yeah, buying local is absolutely one of them. And we talked last time about having your eyes out for wildlife and coexisting with wildlife as being one of them. It's just really wonderful to be elevating these best practices on the homepage of the website. Because we really need to ask the visitors to be part of our sustainable future and encouraging them to see how easy it is to take the free transit, encouraging them to do the reusable versus single-use bottles, and taking time to explore our history, whether it's the Park City Museum or the ski tours next to the mining era relics. As well as leave no trace. And those things, if people prioritize them, it'll change the way that they visit here. It'll change whether they even elect to rent a car, because you don't need to. And you can take a shuttle to Park City. It's 25 minutes from the airport, and then use the free transit system. And most mountain towns can't offer that. So it's really important to get them to know this before they start travel planning.
I love that. That it's very clear on your website so people know, what they're getting into in having a really good vacation in Park City. And then, also for the community to have that understanding of, hey, people are coming and being polite and everyone gets along better. And that's what we want. Everyone's got to get along. So I want to bring our next guest on is Cheryl Luetjen. She is an environmental author and speaker. Her 2 books that we know from her coming on the show is first one she came on with was Love Earth Now. Her most recent one is Madness on the Brink of Eco-Apocalypse. So go to CherylLuetjen.com, and that's LEUTJEN. Everyone's links are in the episode notes. So welcome back, Cheryl. How are you?
Thank you. I am enjoying a much better weather day today here in Los Angeles than we did a month ago when we had those horrific winds and fires, and now it's blue skies and sunny skies.
We want blue skies, right? We definitely do. I know that you wrote about sustainable tourism in your book as well, right?
Yeah, I have one chapter. It's called my unbucket list, actually, but talking about my own efforts to be content where I am, but realizing that, I do love to travel as people do, and exploring how can we make that more sustainable, and the things to look for when we're trying to be eco-friendly in our travel, because there's so much greenwashing and eco hotels out there that really aren't.
Yeah, no, it's the greenwashing. Yeah, that's the thing we got to talk about, because we want people, it has to be honest, you know?
Yes.
And yeah, it
Yes.
has to be honest for sure about that. And so I love that you've included that in your book. I want to bring our next guest on and we can have a good discussion. Maria Chamberlain, she is the innkeeper and co-owner of the Inn at Oxbow Acres in New Hampshire, snowy New Hampshire. And you can go to her website, oxbowacresnh.com. So welcome back, Maria. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a little warmer than it has been. It's been in the single digits and below zero for several weeks now, and now it's like in the high 20s, and so little more tolerable and not so windy.
I wanted to go with you in your location because, like Dan is talking about Park City being this mountain town. You're right by the White Mountains, right? And so,
Yeah.
does your community and region look at that importance being a small destination, like a small community, right? That it's important that you're not overrun and that you have a balanced ecosystem, I should say, of travelers coming in.
Yeah, it last year around this time it was the huge discussion because we had the eclipse. We were in the path
Yeah.
of totality for the eclipse, and there's only like two roads that come up here, and a lot of people didn't know what to expect with
Oh,
all the people coming, and then thinking you can just pull over to the side of the road and into a farmer's field, to park and observe the eclipse. So there was a lot more chatter and preparation and information going around. But as a result of that, we had a lot of people come to visit up here that have been returning because it's such a beautiful area and they didn't know about it before. But especially after COVID, the mountains really got overrun, when people needed to be outdoors and supposedly be, separated somewhat. And everybody started taking on these day trips to the mountains and unfortunately leaving their trash and their garbage and
hmm.
different things. So there's been a heightened awareness and information on the trailheads about taking care of your things and protecting the environment and staying on the trail so that you don't destroy the delicate fauna that's growing there.
I love that you're taking care of that delicate fauna because people forget that, you remember the keep off the grass, man. It's true at places, don't stomp all over it. There's pathways for things, that kind of thing. So Dan, did that happen for Park City after COVID too, right? That's part of that backstory for you, for your
It,
community about
yeah,
everybody's like, let's rush. And then it's like trample nature.
yeah. Park City wasn't that known for its summers before COVID. The national parks that are in Utah and, of course, Yellowstone and really attracted the summer crowds. And the mountains in Wyoming and in Colorado were much more popular. But they didn't want to go to national parks as much during COVID. So they started looking for other outdoor recreation destinations that weren't so well trafficked. And we were certainly one of them. And then a lot of people, a lot of them from New York and Los Angeles, just decided to move here and never went back to the metropolises because they learned that they could do more remote work and kids could even study remotely. So we got a lot of new residents out of that pattern. And then it was our job to ask the new residents to conform to more local practices and not just bring their city habits to a more rural place. And those stories that we just heard about trash, and the trails and places in the mountains that wouldn't normally have seen it were starting to happen. So we needed to enroll them and say, welcome to your new home, but you need to adjust to our way of life if you're going to be a permanent resident here. That was really tough.
I think it is. And I think this is why it's so important to have these kinds of conversations, and frequently, and on a national, obviously local, regional, national, international conversation, because obviously too, when you think about, everything that's happening, right? It's like you can't be the only voice telling people, please pick up your trash. You need more people saying it so that it's, it's not just you, so you don't get picked on. You know what I mean? Being that person. And I think that's why we need these really big conversations where there's an action point to it. And I want to go to Cheryl with that, because she's the city slicker, but I know she doesn't put her trash down, right, Cheryl? With that.
No.
With these kinds of writing books and all of that it's trying to just kind of spread that word, so it's not one person doing it, that it's kind of something we all need to take on. Like we're just talking with another recording for today's show. We just saw a guy just throw a cigarette butt out of the window in front of us, in the car window. And it's like really hard to swallow that without getting out of the car and being a teacher with a pointy finger,
Right.
So
no, I am the bag lady on the hiking trail, picking up trash as I go, and sometimes it makes me not want to get out there, because I feel like, I don't want to pick up trash today. But it's just, I also can't walk by it either. So here I am with my bags.
yeah, that's the thing. So when people see you with your bags, do you think that sparks them, like you're leading by example, and maybe people think, hey, I can do that too, and go pick up
I sure hope so. I walk by the bus stop and I confess, I give some side eyes to people standing at the bus stop, and trash is overflowing on the ground, and the bin is right there, people. I'm like,
yeah,
kind of forcefully picking it up off the ground and putting in the bin. I mean, but that's my own little passive aggressive action.
What are some other things individuals as travelers, what we can do beyond the trash part of it?
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry to jump in. I'm sure the Oxbow Inn is exactly the place that's going to be doing all the things that I have listed in my book to look at, and so I'm going to turn it over. But there's some things I listed are be sure that you are staying at a place that involves local community. It's not just a Marriott, like Los Angelinos going to Park City. It's not Marriott coming into this natural place and doing the Marriott thing. And also, considering the size of the place and how many tourists they have at once. Are they overpopulating the area with and inundating the residents, including the natural environment? And really, if you're really interested, investigate their environmental policies. What are they doing to minimize waste and to conserve energy? How do they power their facilities, and where do they get their water if it's a precious resource in a lot of places we go?
Yeah, exactly. And how much water, I love that. Maria, anything you want to add to that with what's going on at the Oxbow?
Well, yeah, exactly. Because Cheryl was speaking, I'm sorry to kind of barge in, but it's amazing now what you have to tell people. So in winter, there is a campaign. It's called Ski Kind. And so we have infographics and stuff posted at our inn. And it's terrible that you would think that you would have to tell people not to, to know that snow is drinking water. So you can't just poop anywhere. You need to pack your poop and your dog's poop. And don't trash these. They think if they go in the back country, you can just kind of do anything that you want, and they don't realize that these are people have spring-fed wells. Businesses take the spring water, and you just can't defecate and think that it doesn't result later on downstream in somebody's drinking water.
That's
And
huge.
also respecting closures. Like we've had avalanches start because people are like, well, I see that there's a sign posted, but I'm going to ignore that because I want that view or, that experience I came to this mountain for that reason. And then they disrupt everything and the snowpack crumbles underneath them and then you have to get rescue people involved and it's actually huge and it didn't seem like you needed to tell people to respect the environment as much as you do now. Do you guys feel that way too?
I do. I've seen people trash the country as we drive it, and when you talk about the dog thing, I want to touch on that big time. As many of you know, Nancy and I travel the country full time documenting parks and public lands, which is getting very interesting right now. And so really, when we talk about trash and defecation and things like that, not a fun topic, but it's a truth. Our parks are overrun in some areas. We talk about when you go in a park to sometimes take a shuttle, just like what Dan's talking about for Park City. We have less staff in parks, and I know that's federal right now, and it could change every day as we record this. It could change tomorrow, who knows? But the reality, parks have been underfunded pretty much all the time. There are organizations, Friends of Parks, whether it's a state park, a county park, a federal park, public lands that you can support. And a lot of them actually do tours. And so one thing we've learned through all our travels is, okay, stop with the trash. Understand if a place is understaffed, that really take your trash home. And your animals, do you really need to take them there? And please keep them on a leash. You've got to realize that your dog is now in wild country, and you've got to think that these animals only have so much space to go in this world. And so, taking your dog into these wild places, I understand dogs want to run, totally. We pet sit as we travel. And we stay in hotels like we are right now. And bed and breakfast, especially. We love our bed and breakfast like Maria. And the thing is, your dogs are actually could be spreading some issue to wildlife that they don't need, right? Dirty water is a really bad thing, and we need to watch our water. So no matter what happens federally and laws and all of that, we can do it individually as travelers, as locals in our community, and the tourism community in each community can still say, hey, don't pollute in our water. We started our Love Your Parks tour because we went to the Everglades. We were doing a podcast at a garden show, and we went to the Everglades and watched a child throw a soda can. We were on the Ahinga Trail, which is this nice boardwalk area where you can see the alligators, and it's a natural, bayou basically. And there's a ton of Ahinga birds, and it's really a very easy, accessible place for people to be able to see alligators, especially the time of year because they were sunning themselves. It was winter. But this kid just dropped this soda can, into like this nest of alligators that were right there. And the parents did nothing. I had to hold Nancy, my mom, back. We had to hold ourselves back. And then we realized this education needs to happen. So we want these natural spaces. Number one, we need to keep them funded and operating well and being managed. But we also have to watch what we're doing with our animals in these places, because our animals can spread invasive species if they go running off a trail, right? That kind of thing. So just want to say that. And as pet sitters, I also want to say that we are very light-footed in travel because we go into someone's home that is already running and operating. And so we're not taking, and we're also giving back in buying food, and we're also going to hotels and everything too as we travel. But there's this really cool balance. And I think we need to sometimes look at those alternatives. And so when we stay in communities, we are learning how communities dispose of their trash. We know places up in Northeast Pennsylvania that are still burning their trash on the property. That's how they get rid of their trash. Sorry, I'm going on a rant, apparently. I'm going to calm down. Dan, save me.
Well, I have to say that, when our community decided to enroll the new arrivals, we started a real public information campaign. And I love that you're seeing our buses throughout town, which include this biggest fleet of electric buses in the mountains. And they all have messages on them to get behavior modification in front of people. Even if they're just in a car near them, we'd like them out of their car. But all of the messages are about this is what we need from you. And they're like billboards about sustainable behavior. And we also have a great fleet of e-bikes, and the baskets on the front of the e-bikes each have a different message. So we've always said that in marketing, you need to see something 3 times before it even registers. But here, the messages aren't about buy Dawn dishwashing. It's about behavior in a fragile rural place. And the messages over and over again until finally we know that, that's how to get people to get a conscience, get a consciousness, and say, this is what I saw Park City saying they needed from us. Maybe they won't throw stuff when that's the message that's saying, use the right receptacles. Here, water is a resource. Utah is a dry environment, and we rely on snow melt for your water. Where are they going to learn this? So I love that the town was willing to give us that real estate on the buses and on the e-bike trail to help educate and maybe, embed some new information in people's behavior.
I think that's it. It is this communication that has to happen, and we can't sit back. I think, Cheryl, that's part of why you wrote both your books. We can't wait. Like this,
Right.
we need to do it now and as fast as we can. I think our very younger generation is really trying to be better stewards of the land. They've got a fear too, a healthy fear of what's happening with climate change. So I think sometimes children help teach the parent. Have you seen that with what's happened with your books and you as a parent?
Yeah, that was one of the things that inspired me to write what I do, because when my son was in about 7th, 8th grade, I was talking to him something about climate change, and he said, "We already know, Mom, and we're already depressed." And that just kind of broke my heart. And so, yes, that's what I write and speak about, is to encourage people, including me. I always say that, including me, to do more, even if, as a person who walks the trail with a trash sack, what else can I be doing? Because I know the temptation to tune it out. The problems are so big and so complicated and so many, and it's easy to say, well, somebody else has got to do this. It's not me. And so I tried to break down very small bits and pieces. What can I do on my own? And also finding groups that are doing good things and joining up with them. And so you don't have to start from scratch. There are a million environmental and conservation type groups that you can join forces with. And then you also have that also bolsters my own resolve to do something, because I know the work is continuing and that people need help, and that I show up because of that.
That's awesome. I love that you keep going,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you have a music playlist to keep you going, right?
Yeah. The new book has got I call it Furious Facts, and there's a lot of it. So I entice people to keep reading with a playlist. I've got some comedy, dark humor, whatever I can do. There's even a recipe and instructions for doing a jigsaw puzzle, whatever it takes. We got to keep ourselves going somehow.
Yeah, and you're allowed to have salty language. Can I add that in there in a little wine? No,
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Yes, very much
Maria,
so.
At the inn itself, as do you do things, like here, this is fresh from the farm and it's good to support your local farm, that kind of thing, and do certain practices at the inn that are sustainable? I know you grow rhubarb and strawberry pie.
Yes, during the summertime, you know, we grow a lot of breakfast things like our potatoes for the home fries and spinach and, you know, greens and herbs and different things. But I'm so excited that this all happened today, this podcast, because we had a new business go up about a year ago, and it's called North Country Growers, and it's maybe 8 minutes from here. And it's the first greenhouse in New England to combine um, heat and power technology to operate. So they call that CHP, combined heat and power. So they do um, hydroponic irrigation. They heat the building, and well, I got the in scoop. It's so incredible. My guest tonight, or he was my guest last night, and he's here for the week, is he's the vice president of this engineering and project management company. If you look up INEO, Jen Bacher, it's based out of Germany, and their goal is zero emissions worldwide, and they try to harness clean energy. So what they're doing at this little greenhouse in northern New Hampshire is they're heating it, and they're taking the um, they're taking the gases from heating it and reharnessing them to power the plant, and then they're piping the carbon dioxide that gets put off into the greenhouses to feed the plants. And he says it's like a trifecta. Normally companies try to do a two thing, and it's rare that there's a three-way transmission of resources. So it was just amazing listening to him last night, and he had to go to work this morning. But I looked into that INEO earlier, and they have the platinum medal from EcoVadis, which is they evaluate sustainability performance worldwide, and they're top rated with Morningstar, which does Sustainalytics, and the German Sustainability Award because it's based out of Germany. And they also have this Responsible Minerals Initiative, which my husband and I talk about that all the time. Like, it's great that we do solar, but solar is only effective if you have the batteries. Batteries need lithium, and then how much damage are you doing as you're mining lithium?
Yeah, exactly.
So they have this Responsible Minerals Initiative. So it's something to look into. They're a supporter of Race to Zero, which is that global campaign with the United Nations to get to zero emissions. So I'm pretty honored that
That's awesome.
Is this person. And we love North Country Growers. That's what I do in the wintertime. They have the crunchiest lettuce and the most delicious romaine and butter crunch. I mean, they sell it at the local grocery store. And that's what I do for dinners at the end.
Awesome.
So
That's nice. And I think the food, imprint is a big deal too. And when we talk about supporting local businesses, that money that as a traveler, it's going directly into that local economy, and you're part of the community when you do that. Whether you live there full time or you're passing through, you're helping the community by supporting these small businesses that are it's happening. Dan, in Park City, is there a lot of local food? I know you have a distillery. Now that's where we all need to be doing this show. Makes it a lot calmer. But do you have a lot of restaurants that are like farm to table style, or at least using local Utah ingredients?
We do, and we have an anti-chain ordinance on our main street in order to provide that local experience and support locally owned restaurants and shops, because I think tourism is becoming homogenized globally, and you get off the boat in Sitka, Alaska, and you see all the same brands that you would anywhere, and it's sad because we want to keep people traveling and seeing the beauty of the local environment and local foods and local shops. And it's up to the towns to make those laws so that
Mm.
because real estate prices are encouraging only the highest prices from global brands. And that's creating an unfortunate situation for visitors. So it's up to the local um, city council, county supervisors to say this is important and to support, find ways of supporting local before we start looking like absolutely everyone else.
Mm.
It has to be holistic, from the landlord to the city council and all of the new local businesses that want to come in and make a go of it. They need the support, and it
Hmm.
works for the town.
Well, there's statistics proving that even the visitors want to have an authentic experience. And why would we travel if the next destination looks like where you just came from, you know?
Yeah.
So, I think it's important that you have that, unique destination. Like, hey, this is who you are. It's integrity, because if a town sells itself off, you've lost who you are. You've lost your value. You've lost your individuality. And that
Yeah.
goes for people, you know? And so then the community starts to lose pride in its community. It loses, I mean, it ruins everything. And you do not have diversity. You don't, and I mean diversity of all things when you start doing that. That's how we ended up with, the same type of turkey at Thanksgiving is because we got rid of diversity of turkeys, our heritage farms, things like that. When we start doing everything in this grand big scale, everything being the same, that is not allowing for creativity or diversity. It's boring. It really is. So I think this is so important when we talk about these different ways and having those strategies in a town where the town goes, okay, we don't want this, we don't want that. When we lived up in the mountains in San Diego, we did not, nobody, there was no, no franchises were allowed. They had one subway, and I think it's now gone because it had some contract from way back when. And when that contract happened, they knew it was time to move down the hill. And that's what made it fun and a funky little town, is because it was like, oh, go around the corner and there's this fun little jewelry shop. And I don't know. And people are happy. And they're happy when it's not, so many people all at once. It's just, I don't know, the atmosphere feels happier and it's good for nature. It's good for people. It's good to protect history too. Is that part of it too, Dan, is the history when we talk about
Very important.
sustainability?
One of the 6 sustainable keys has to do with your history and your authenticity, and to make sure you hold on to it, to encourage people to experience it. That's what they'll take home, is the memory of the history. And we have resources that date to the town's founding as a silver mining town back in the late 1800s. And it's critical to maintain those. The Historical Society here does an annual ribbon for the residents who have done a beautiful job of maintaining their historic homes, and they can display their ribbons on their front porches. And people from the big cities come into Park City and they say, "Is this charming?" And it's because we really encourage that preservation of historic structures and interaction with our history so that we don't lose it. I mean, development is a danger when it takes away those resources and incentivizes people to tear things down instead of restore them. It's expensive to restore them, or creates laws around architecture so that new buildings respect historic settings. And I just love seeing the agreement that those are worth the effort to do. They're expensive to do, but once you lose it, you cannot regain it. So these local messages are part of sustainability, that this town, hopefully in 200 years, still looks like it does today because they gave the incentives to keep it that way and reward people who are behaving that way.
Yeah. No, I love this. This is, see, if there's a will, there's a way, right? We can all do this. I want to with Cheryl in her books, and she's done so much research on how to do things. Cheryl, history, is that something that historic places and historic sites, does that come in with nature for us? Every park we've been to, there's always history. There's natural history, and I don't know, history. Every National Park Service has some form of history. You go to Yosemite, you're going to learn, yes, about John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt, but you're going to learn about the different Native American tribes that live up in the high Sierras. Same thing in Sequoia Kings Canyon down the road from them. There's historic parks like Fort Union in northern New Mexico, which had 2 forts built on there, and went through different wars, and it's on Route 66. And part of the Park Service is there to protect that land, but it's also part of nature. Elk run through there. It's got shortgrass prairie that is, getting taken out of our country. Like wetlands and prairie grounds, prairie land is so vital to our makeup, our biodiversity. But because there's this history there, you get to protect the nature. So I was wondering, Cheryl, if you've across that in your research, that kind of thing, and the importance of history.
I'm not as well versed in human history, but it's undoubtedly true that people who have come before us, indigenous people, lived more harmoniously with nature than we do. They weren't perfect either in all ways, but there's a lot we can learn about how they lived in more harmony with, the critters and the flora and the fauna that were already there and persisted for, however many hundreds or thousands of years that they lived there. Whereas, our so-called modern culture comes in and wipes out an environment pretty quickly.
And we can learn from our ancestors.
Yes.
There's so much lessons, especially of the indigenous people, And Maria, for you, what about history? How does that roll in for you in sustainability? I know you love history.
I do. Well, and this Androscoggin River just has so much history, with the, like I said, Berlin was the paper capital of the world, and the logs in the river, that have sunken tell a story. There's all this beautiful preserved wood, which is now home for different schools of fish, the brown trout and the landlocked salmon and the rainbow trout and things like that lay their eggs, and all the amphibians. And the water level was pretty low this summer. So I didn't realize that mussels were found on the riverbanks up here. So I found mussel shells. So there's a lot of life that goes on. And it's, it was because of these big log drives that came down the river back in the day. So history is important, that people know and appreciate it, and want to come see it, and learn more and tell their kids, which is really important. So I guess it's not just the history, but it's the education, as you were talking about. Like we need to teach the kids about how to care for the environment and how to appreciate it.
Yeah, one of the lessons we learned was at Sequoia National Park, and they had built cabins. They cleared Sequoia. So here's tourism, right? They go, oh, all these people want to come to the park. This is very historic times, and they learned, oh, we need to protect the sequoias, and they cut down part of the forest to put cabins in for the visitors. And now they stopped doing that. They're like, oh my gosh, we just did the exact opposite. And they tell this story. And it's like, okay, let's learn from the past of what to do and what not to do again, and now they have like campgrounds where people can go and camp and be in the trees, and, there's lodging down the hill, but they don't do anything like that again in the Park Service itself, So it's an interesting thing when you look at history about what to learn from. So in closing, I wanted to go to each of you and ask you to share one piece of advice or tip, whether it's for a town, a community, an attraction, anybody in the tourism world or the traveler, The one tip that people can take to heart right now and start taking action on, because we do need to have these conversations. We do need this kind of education to go out there, but we also need action. And like the time is ticking, and it's not just climate change. It's just general, let's keep the land clean and think about all the wildlife. Climate change is wreaking havoc. Fires are burning hotter and hotter and hotter. Earthquakes and hurricanes are becoming a norm. And we have to somehow step back. And you think that it destroys land as well as the humans, right? Human life is lost through all of this. And that's what we've seen right now. Nancy and I have been to pretty much everywhere that Hurricane Helene and Milton have touched down on since the hurricane. And we were in the hurricane. And going through and seeing the loss of trees is heartbreaking. Obviously, human lives and homes and what happened to pets. But when you go around it, that's your first thing that you see is all these trees, these ancient oaks being just, and then you see how big they are when they're down. And then you start to realize what happens to all the wildlife during these disasters. These disasters take so long to get back. It's an uphill battle for the human. It's an even just dealing with insurance agencies and stuff, right? But it's an upward battle. Land will restore itself, but humans keep poking at it. And so the more we can coexist, the happier our human beings will be. We become happier. I know, Maria, you see people being happier when they go out and go skiing or hiking, right? Where you are. They get in nature, they're restored, right? They come back happier, healthier. Dan, you see that in Park City, right? People go out, come back in. They can go in a cave with water, right? And go paddleboard. Am I right on that? They can go paddleboarding in a cave.
Well, yes, there's a cave where it's a natural hot springs. And so, yes, people can do stand-up paddleboarding or yoga in the hot springs, which is under the ground.
It's crazy, man. But do you see people happy when they get out in nature?
Of course.
In town. Yeah. And Cheryl, I know you know that, right? It's all better for us. So to really, take action to keep that happiness is so important. So Dan, for you, what would be the one bit of advice?
Well, I would say think really big and bold and not be afraid to change some global dynamics. We submitted a bid to host the Olympic Games. And in the past, you would get points for building new things that would literally be just taken down the second the games are over. It was very wasteful. It's very bad for the environment. And we said to the IOC, we will only host an Olympic Games if we can be a role model for future sustainable practices and reusing the facilities and the venues. That has never been done, and you used to get penalized for that kind of proposal. But we put it down, and we won the 2034 Olympic bid based on a new way of thinking and a new way of asking for everyone to be more sustainable, less wasteful. It's big thinking, but we weren't afraid to do something different because, as you said, time is ticking. And, the Olympics are a global movement and can be very wasteful. So what can we do to change not only our bid, but the way that other cities and countries in the future host an Olympic Games? It has never been a priority to be sustainable on these games. And we did it. We threw down this proposal and we won the bid. And we hope that this isn't just a Utah thing, that it will be something that future destinations will copy. But we had to be really bold and not afraid to lose the games over this kind of statement about, philosophy around being less wasteful in presenting global events. And I love that we were able to do that, not because we necessarily won, but because it can change the future of our world by asking people to give better bids that takes us. We think we'll be the first games that is a carbon neutral or even net positive where no one is driving private cars. We're doing transportation. Our footprint is very small between Salt Lake and Park City. It's 25 miles. Whereas this winter, it's going to be in Milan, and that's 3 hours from Cortina, where the mountains are. That's a 6-hour round trip. It's very different from what we were proposing. So I'm hopeful that we can be role models. We can be unafraid to ask big questions of big governmental and international bodies and just say, this is important to us, and we're willing to die on that hill. Like, we'll lose the games if it means being wasteful. So I would encourage people to not be afraid of change and making big changes.
I think this is so crucial what you're saying, because you go for it, right? You're wearing your heart on your sleeve, and you're being an example, leading with example again, right? And at the same time, you look at all these big games. Look at Wimbledon. Look at Super Bowl. Look at the World Cup that's coming next year to New York State. Those things are massive, and you have to look at the dollars that go in to make the city have all. You guys know that in Park City, have all the infrastructure. When the World Cup went to South Africa, which is where we lived, and it went to our town, and what happens once they put all this infrastructure in? Is it utilized? Is it left? What happens with everybody's trash at these events? It's huge. So I think it's the Olympics and all of those, so I think you're standing up for more than the Olympics, honestly, and the Olympics, talk about, that is such a, was it Coubertin? Am I saying his name right? Coubertin that did it. The Olympics history is so fascinating, and it's about peace. The games were about unity and world peace and global community. So when you're doing something like, hey, let's be sustainable about this, Dan, I think that goes out to the globe when you do that, because of the way the Olympics are.
And we annually give out here in town sustainable tourism grants to encourage every event planner to find transportation and recycling alternatives, that we will literally give them money to present a more sustainable event plan. And we sponsor that to demonstrate that we're putting our money where our mouth is around these kinds of events.
That's awesome. I know, like Louisiana, we had Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser on a few times on the show, and their initiative, especially is coming out of the hurricanes, right? And rebuilding is, they've got some issues, of, what happens after a hurricane, what happens to the fish, what happens, all of that. And so they put in things where, if you're a restaurant and you use local seafood, you get, a break or, a grant kind of thing. And they did it for local musicians to keep Louisiana, which is a huge music state, the whole state. And so whenever you have a festival, if you hired a local Louisiana musician, then you get funded, partially funded by the state. And I think those are those initiatives that can make change. There's initiatives where, helping, someone's got land and they want to preserve it and conserve it instead of someone coming and taking all the trees out. Then there's grants out there to have people be able to even be on their land, and that land gets conserved, so those programs really work, and they work well, and it opens people's eyes, In closing, Cheryl, what about you? What is your tip?
I want to put in a pitch for the Green Acres Chocolate Farm in Panama.
Yes, please do.
My good friend Gary Mitchell, I knew here in Los Angeles, very environmentally minded, decided he wanted to do something big and bold, and he purchased this existing chocolate farm in Panama and has made a real eco resort out of it. Everything is powered by solar energy. All the water they use is collected rainfall, and they work very closely with the local indigenous people. You may even be able to go on a tour to an indigenous village. They provide critical habitat for the endangered great green macaw. And yes, they do make some really good organic chocolate. So that's totally at the top of my list my bucket list. And they also have howler monkeys and sloths and poison dart frogs and toucans
Cool.
and vegan food. And it's really sounds like an amazing place that I really want to visit. And he's done a lot of thought and work into, honoring the principles we've been talking about.
That's awesome. And everyone, you can go to his website, planetrehab.org, to check it out. It's awesome. Well, this also goes to how we get our coffee. Is it sustainable? Is it,
Yeah.
Protecting rainforests, and, the macaws are so special. If he needs, some volunteers, hello, I'd like to go. Definitely. Maria, how would you like to close it off? It's on you now.
Well, I would just say if you are touring an area and you go to a place because you want to find out more about it, it captivated you for some reason. Many of them have farmers markets. So rather than as you're going to be hiking or planning your picnic lunch or sightseeing, and you notice a farmers market sign or a group of people around a central area, we have commons here in New England is what they call them. Stop and support those local businesses. You'll typically get things in a little paper bag, and you're supporting a small business that is trying to be sustainable as well.
Oh man, that's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Everyone, again, I'm going to give everyone's websites out. I thank you all for joining us on this show. We're going to have more and more of these conversations to keep spreading the word of what we can do. But I love to hear how it can be individual businesses, communities, individual travelers, cities, and even going as far as big as proposals for the Olympics. So everyone, you can go to visitparkcity.com. You can also go to CherylLujan.com and OxbowAcresNH.com, and all those links are in the episode notes. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, so we are talking about conservation in regards to tourism. So it's ecotourism, or you could call it sustainable tourism. But we've got two travel writers joining us here on Big Blend Radio. We've got travel writer Jo Clark. You know her from her podcast on Big Blend Radio. You have glassfultravel.com as a website, but Jo Goes Everywhere. That's her Instagram name. So you can listen to Jo Goes Everywhere every second Sunday at 7 p.m. And you can also go to our website, recipiestravelculture.com. But welcome back, Jo. How are you?
I'm great. The sun's shining. It's back in the 60s, so I'm a happy camper at the beach.
Well, that's awesome. Good for you.
How are you?
Cold.
Cold? You don't have the same story?
No, it's a little cold. It's a little cold, but it is warmer than what it was. So that's a good thing. Today, we're actually recording out of a hotel room in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. It's a beautiful area right outside Smoky Mountain National Park. And, but yeah, so it's a little chilly, but
they had snow, didn't they?
Yes, it did. It snowed. And,
keep seeing pictures up from my friends on Facebook. I have friends out that way.
And we drove through some of your towns, going through actually in Virginia that you were doing a podcast about a little bit ago. So yeah, beautiful area. We've got Barbara Redding here, who's also a travel writer and photographer. You can keep up with her on barbararedding.com. She's on a lot of shows here on Big Blend Radio, and she loves to travel the world. So it's good to get her on again. So welcome back, Barbara. How are things in Austin?
They're great. Thank you. Happy to be here. We just got past a cold snap, so I feel like Joe. The sun is out. It's going to be 70 today, so that's it feels like it's back to normal in Texas. So I'm excited.
Oh, that's good. Well, good. And this is something when we talk about sustainable travel and tourism, the weather is an important factor, and it keeps changing. So we look at climate change, 4 hurricanes Nancy and I dodged last year, which we're very lucky to dodge. But it's something as travelers we've got to think about, and I think also destinations. And that's why we look a lot at what are we going to do about tourism in regards to being sustainable, eco-friendly. And when we talk about World Conservation Strategy Day, it's really about highlighting the need to protect essential ecological processes, maintain genetic diversity, so of the species, and also make sure that all of these ecosystems are sustainable, but also can work with travelers that come in, and also about local shopping, because that's the authentic travel side. There are some amazing statistics out as well that show just the importance of, sustainable travel for the tourists, because there over 80% of travelers actually want to have ecotourism be part of a destination's makeup in regards to the activities, in regards to the lodging, the dining, all of that. So I think that's pretty exciting when you think about the travelers wanting it, and sometimes the places they go to, that's not accessible to them. But it seems that it's a multi-billion-dollar industry to be in ecotourism. So I wanted to touch on Croatia with you, Barbara, because that's some place you were saying that you experienced some sustainable tourism there and tourism efforts.
Right. It's a beautiful country, and because of the gorgeous beaches and the historic ruins, that people have been flocking to Croatia since it joined. Well, had been part of the Soviet bloc, and then finally freed itself from that, had some internal troubles, and then finally joined the EU, and now is like one of the top tourist destinations in Europe. So it's a small country. It's only a population of 4 million, and they've had as many as 15 to 20 million people coming in a year. And so that's the challenge for them, is to continue to be attractive to visitors, but to make sure that they are not one of too many people at the beach or on the walls of the Dubrovnik fort and baking with thousands of other tourists. And so the country is doing a number of things to try to manage its tourism better for the sake of the tourists as well as the sake of the destinations. And so one of the hotel groups. I think I got that from you.
Yeah.
They both have beds. It's okay.
Hospitality comes from being in a hospital, and they do charge you a room rate, and they give you meals,
and they feed you.
But they don't give you wine. I've never seen that, but they could give you morphine instead. So, all right, let's go.
So you want to stay out of the hospital and stay in a really nice hotel that manages, its facilities and its food. One of the things, as I said, it's a group of 17 kind of luxury upscale hotels in Croatia that have kind of banded together. They're not the same brands, but the idea is for them to promote tourism year round. The problem with Croatia is everybody wants to come when the sun's out in July and August. Places packed. So they've been working together to do more advertising and promotion to entice people to say, hey, Croatia is wonderful year round. Let's, divide up the group so that the tourists can have a much better experience, and you will not have as negative an impact on the environment as when you overrun the destination.
That's really true. We lived in and covered a small town in San Diego called Julian. It's a little mountain town. And it's like 3,500 people at the time when we lived there. And they're famous for apple pie. And they have apple orchards and peaches and wineries. Joe would like it there. And it's a beautiful destination. And we were part of the tourism effort there in fixing it up, because it was a 4-season destination, but everybody just thought apple pie. And then in October, because they had this apple festival every October, like historically. And then it just got into everyone's brains that is the time to go to Julian, which was beautiful in the fall. But in reality, half of the time, the apples were ready in July or August, not necessarily October. And
that's kind of late for apples.
Yeah. And people would it was kind of like a fall, thing. Mm-hmm. And everybody the residents hated it. They would put up signs, "Don't park on my lawn," all those kinds of things. So there was an agitation in the residents that wanted to live in this peaceful historic town. And then the downtown, there was no parking, there wasn't enough bathrooms, and that was, we need bathrooms. And then they were coin operated, and people were like, why do I have to pay for the bathroom? And there was this whole thing, and we were part of the program of marketing it being, just like you're saying, Barbara, for Croatia, being 4 seasons, because they had gentle seasons. In winter, you'd get a little snow if you're lucky, and then people would flock there too. And we also had to, look at how people treated like people's yards in the snow. It's like that, just because there's a hill on someone's, backyard doesn't mean you get to go sliding and sledding in their garden, So there was a lot of communication on that. And spring was beautiful with lilacs in bloom everywhere. Over 1 million daffodils were planted throughout the community. And it was a former gold mining town, so that kind of went with that. And summer was beautiful. We had forests, we had beautiful lakes, hiking, in fall, gorgeous, of course. So 4 gentle seasons, and it took time. And we had to do tourism marketing in the immediate surroundings, which was, marketing to the coast for June gloom, when the weather, gets a little foggy in the summer there. And then also to the surrounding deserts to get summer. And so it, you have to change how you communicate, and you have to listen to the local communities to make a change for sustainability. And that way the locals don't get mad at tourists, and people kind of calm down and have a good time. Because when it's too busy, it's not good for the infrastructure, something we're already experiencing in our national parks. And, which is something we've been fighting for years, is, that kind of, we have to behave as travelers too. And right now our parks are underfunded. And so when we go there, let's not add more trash if we don't have to, maybe clean up after ourselves, that kind of thing. So I think it's the traveler has to be a little bit more conscious. Would you say as well, Barbara, if they done that kind of marketing to the traveler?
For sure. Yes, for sure. And I think that that's what, what people need to be thoughtful in choosing their vacation destinations, number one, and then number two, when they go. Do you really want to be crowded on top of a hot stone castle, or do you want to go in the fall or in the spring or other times of year? Sometimes it's difficult to go off season, but I think that more people are figuring out that that's a much better time for them, and a much better time for the destination too. They can have a better experience, get more personal treatment, have meals that are served at a leisurely pace, as opposed to lined up down the street to go into the best restaurants.
Yeah, and also a lot of times you have better pricing. And the other thing is also about going midweek versus the weekend. And with the way the world has changed to be more remote in a working lifestyle, I think it's doable. It's doable as long as they have good internet. So I wanted to go over to you, Joe. Who or what did you want to talk about in regards to sustainable tourism?
Oh, a lot of things come to mind for me. Talking about the off season, to me, the off season's the best season. That really resonates with me. There are no crowds, no lines, lower prices, quiet rooms, because you don't have people packed in on both sides of you with 14 kids in a room, hopefully. And for the most part, you have better flowers. If you go in the spring, or in the fall, you may have beautiful leaves. And I love the off season. I like not being crowded. When I do walking tours and history tours, or horseback riding or kayaking, all of those are things I enjoy doing, but they're a lot more fun if there's, a group of 6 instead of a group of 25.
Mm-hmm. And what you just, listed as experiences are very sustainable ecotourism. They're light on the land, kayaking. As long as you take your trash out, again, that's a huge deal. Yeah. I mean, Nancy and I travel full time.
In, you carry out.
I couldn't believe it. We travel full time, and we were in traffic coming in here, and I watched some guy just throw a cigarette butt out the window, and I try not to lose my cool, but
and rear ending.
Yeah, I mean,
You just
I
want
need,
to ram him.
I need like a whip or something that comes out of the car, you know.
Or a blue
Road
But
light.
rage, watch out.
yeah, just, that's not sustainable either. but, but,
Yeah.
but there's this, we have so much trash across the country now. I know hurricanes blow trash and things like that, but we still have this
We don't need to
education
add to it. Yeah.
no, we don't want to go in these beautiful country places with, talking about Virginia and West Virginia and North Carolina, East Tennessee, where we are. It's just so beautiful, no matter what
Yep.
time of year. And there's hawks out right now, a lot of the leaves because it's winter. There's no greenery, right? But you're seeing hawks and eagle nests everywhere, which is
Yeah.
pretty
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
But then if you look down and you've got trash bags, now that you're driving going, oh, I see something white. Is that a trash bag or a hawk? That's not
Right.
cool,
No,
you know?
no, it's not.
So the
And for
behavior is, Mhm.
go ahead.
No, you go.
I was swinging into a new direction. So
Go ahead.
because we haven't talked about food, eat and drink local, go to farmers markets, pack your own picnic lunches. I love that's one of the first things I look for wherever I am in another country, especially. I look for those farmers markets. I like to walk through and see what do they grow? What do I recognize? What do I not recognize? And then I pick things up so I have things to snack on. You don't have to have junk food if you've got a farmer's market and they've got cheeses and lots of times they have wines.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty cool.
And and you're eating local, so the footprint
Yeah, you're
of
supporting
something
the
being
local
shipped.
people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
shopping local, like craft fairs, things like that. If you're one that buys souvenirs to take home and bring back to other friends that don't travel, go to craft fairs, find local things that people made where you went.
I love that idea. And because it also, as soon as when you shop at these destinations and it's going right to a small business or that individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
At fairs like you're talking about, that farmer, your money is going directly into the community. So as a traveler, we're part of that community temporarily. So we
Yep.
become part of it. The food
And you
part
have
is
something to look
important.
at when you get home and think about your time there and that sweet lady that was making those baskets that you met and took a picture of her and then you bought a basket. It just adds to your memories.
That's really true. I think right now it's also important to say just on that, following with what you said, Joe. Right now we're still looking at, Nancy and I've been through a lot of Georgia, Florida, North Florida, East Tennessee. Yeah, we've been through pretty much everywhere Hurricane Helene went now. And the
Yep.
recovery efforts are incredible, but people are still homeless. People are still battling to get insurance money.
Yep.
There's still an uphill battle, just like in Lahaina and Maui. Sharon Kurtz is on the show too with this, and the one thing we can all do, like the LA fires, right? And Hurricane Milton also did some nasty damage.
Yes, it did.
What we can do is if we can go as visitors, and they do want that. So please know that these places are open. Asheville, our friends at the Lion and the Rose Bed and Breakfast, we did a live stream from there actually after touring Asheville. They are still getting calls with people saying, "Are you open?" It's on their website. We're open, but nervous to come. And
Yeah.
please do go to these places. Tread lightly.
They need it
as
more
far
than
as
ever now. They need the
they
money.
really, tourism
'Cause-
can be the
Yeah.
salvation of a town.
Yeah.
If it's done
Because they've had
correctly.
4 or 5 months now with no tourism.
Right.
And
Right.
that takes a big dent right there.
Yes.
That leaves a big hole in your bank account. It's hard to buy groceries and pay your bills when there wasn't any money coming in all that time.
Exactly. And traveling and going to places that are mom and pop owned, whether it's lodging, going on the kayak ride, that kind of thing, horse riding, you're helping those individuals and you're helping them sustain themselves and rebuild. And so you're being part of
Yes.
that community, which is amazing to know that your travel is beneficial, not just to yourself, but to a community and to people and to the planet, to the wildlife, to the nature part of it. So sustainable tourism, if it's done right, can make everybody happy. And you can volunteer. That's the other part, is you can do volunteering when you travel as well. That's something, you can be part of the cleanup crew,
Yeah,
you know,
that's true too.
not as a vulture, but as a person, So I love this.
I think I could handle the cleaning up part better than some of the other things that, younger people can do, the building and rebuilding. I have cousins that have now been for 2 different weeks to build tiny homes in the Asheville area.
That's wonderful. And you do what you know how to do,
Yep.
And one thing we can all do is use social media too to talk about places. But I think it comes from, the meeting. Let's see, Barbara, with Croatia being such a great example, it really is about the community, like Croatia itself, the actual country, having this dialogue with the locals and having a dialogue with their visitors, right? It's like having house rules when someone comes to visit you. It's like, please don't smoke inside my house. Go
Right.
down two blocks away.
Right. And they've had, Dubrovnik is probably one of the most popular cruise ship stops in the world. It's just such a beautiful city to sail into, but they've had too many cruise ships coming in at once. And so that's something I think that the locals were unhappy about, and the government finally kind of got together with cruise lines and said, okay, we need to set some limitations. And, I think that countries and or destinations that are proactive, can come up with a compromise that works for everybody. And those that aren't, there are places in France now that are just flat out banning cruise ships, period. So it's, trying to kind of figure out how to balance tourism, which brings in money that's needed in destinations, whether they've been hit by a hurricane or it's a big part of their economy, is, I think, one of the challenges that the destinations face, and I think that the travel industry faces. I think that us as travel writers sometimes have to be conscious of that too. Okay, we're, to look for places that aren't over touristed to write about, because some of the places that some of the best, I think Rick Steves sometimes gets blamed for all the traffic on the in Cinque Terre, because he kind of highlighted it, and then everybody came, and now there are too many people. So it's a challenge, I think, on the part of pretty much everybody involved in tourism and travel today, to figure out, what can you do as an individual, and what can companies and countries do to make sure that it's working for everybody.
Joe, I was going to ask you, as a travel writer, do you tend to focus on definitely parks, wine? We know that. She loves her wine, Have Glass Will Travel, but it seems to me that as a travel writer that you focus on the smaller shops, restaurants.
I do. I love finding, that's what we call hidden gems. These are the places that other people don't go, they don't know about. And you wander in there and you're like, wow, this is the best croissant in town, or this is the best rooftop bar. It's all those things that make your trip memorable. I like the ones that people don't know about.
That need a little promotion to help them.
Yeah.
And that's the when one place, nobody wants to be Disneyland, right? As a small business, but they want that consistency. And that means you can breathe as a small business. It's the cash flow and that consistency of cash flow. And so if you have a steady stream of people that's not over the top, not Rick Steves over the top. I don't think he meant that to happen. But if
he didn't.
I don't have quite that many followers. I don't think my people need to worry.
but it's a steady stream. If you have a slow, steady stream, that's helpful. That's helpful.
Yeah.
And then people when they're financially viable, then they're able to do things for their community, to help the environment, to help the parks, donate or do things when they're strong on their own as a company, a small business. So sustainability is about standing strong in things and being able to give back. Because, like that whole thing about putting the oxygen mask on your face first, right?
Yep. Can't help anybody until you help yourself.
Right. And so helping the small businesses, I think is a crucial thing, and the nonprofits, But ladies, thank you so much for being part of our sustainable and ecotourism show. Everyone, again, barbararedding.com is a website to go, and you can follow Barbara around the world, and you can follow Joe around the world. Go to haveglassabletravel.com and recipiestravelculture.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Fun. It has been.
So everyone, talking about sustainability and ecotourism, we've got Glenn Burrows, who owns and operates Norfolk Tours in England. And Glenn is all about doing everything locally, supporting small business. And we're going to talk a little bit about that with Glenn, about how that helps in the environment too, to protect the environment and quality of life. You can go to his website, norfolk-tours.co.uk. So Glenn, sustainable tourism, if it's sustainable for humans, it makes it better for the planet, doesn't it?
It makes it better for everybody and everything, because we're keeping everything local. I mean, if you go to a local bed and breakfast and you go to a local cafe or a local restaurant, when I say local, I mean owned by a local people, like, a Ma and Pa shop, as you have in America and Canada. It's all about the local market, the local produce, eating things in season, not importing stuff from across the other side of the world just because you want strawberries at Christmas, silly things like that. If you support local vegetable growers, fruit growers, animal producers, local cheeses, you're not creating a massive amount of wasted travel, because we're doing it all the time now. We're wanting things when we want them. When I was young, we didn't have strawberries at Christmas. We had strawberries in July and August, and that was it. Now you have strawberries all year round, which is ridiculous. We don't need strawberries all year round. So it's all about keeping things locally, supporting local growers, local markets, and local businesses also help to keep the economy local, keeps the money going around local, and keeps the standard of living up in the place that you're visiting. So if you're going to a local cafe, a local restaurant, and you're buying from a local Ma and Pa shop, then you're sustaining the place that you're visiting. And that's so important to sustainable tourism. Because what's the point of turning everywhere into everywhere else?
Yeah. And a lot of packaging comes with all of the other stuff. And I think that's something that is forgotten about, is packaging. When we talk about sustainability, you can get a piece of meat from your local butcher that maybe you're going to go to your vacation rental or whatever, and you don't need styrofoam and plastic and you don't need 20 things to package something that went across the country when it comes from something local, and that really helps the environment, to do things.
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, all of our meat and that was wrapped up in greaseproof paper. It wasn't wrapped up in plastic or anything. It was wrapped up in greaseproof paper.
And newspaper, fish and chips with newspaper, but that gave it a second life. I know it's illegal now, but
it was quite good enough for us. I mean, if you wrap it up in greaseproof paper and then wrap it up in newspaper, what's the problem? I know.
Okay, but I wanted to ask you this for people to understand about England. As travelers, is England doing any improvement on having like trash cans, as we say, there's recycling in parks that we have, that kind of thing? Or does England looking at being more environmentally friendly for visitors.
Absolutely. Most places you go to now will have a recycling bin, so you can put things in that are, cardboard or glass or hard plastic. We don't use a lot of reusable plastic anymore. So, you don't generally find plastic carrier bags anymore. You'll find a hard plastic carrier bag, and you'll also find a lot of paper bags, which obviously are recyclable. We are getting more thoughtful about recycling, but I still see in the big supermarkets there is far too much plastic.
Mm-hmm.
We're wrapping up vegetables where we don't need to wrap up vegetables. Mm-hmm. And it's all to do with the ease of selling, Mm. But again, it's all about, if you buy from a local market, they're all loose. So you take your own bag and you'll weigh your potatoes and he'll tip them in your bag for you.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to a shop, 9 times out of 10, they are still wrapped in a plastic bag.
And veggies don't want to be in bags. That's how they go rotten.
Well, exactly. They sweat.
Yeah, little
they
sweaty
like us.
potatoes.
If they get hot and cold, they sweat, and then they go
get sweaty.
rotten, and then you chuck them out. And then how is that for sustainability when you're buying stuff and they're going to end up in a landfill?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's just ridiculous. Don't start me on it.
Okay, but now what about going to parks? And is that also a big draw for people going to England? And we as visitors, that's the other part of, we need to be kind to the land if people go to the Lake District or, go, to the local forest that you have, because you've got beautiful forest areas. And so you want people to behave.
Well, yes, I mean, exactly, especially in summertime, don't have barbecues in summertime in a forest, it's rather silly, and if you take stuff, take your rubbish home with you, it's pretty simple. I mean, we brought our children up to bring their rubbish home, and at the end of the day at school, my wife always used to find a pocket full of sweet wrappers and things, but that's what you should do. Mm-hmm. You should have a pocket full of sweet wrappers because you do not want to throw them down anywhere. It's simple. It's just what you would do at home. So just carry on doing the nice things wherever you're on holiday. Do the nice things. Do what you would like people to do in your own backyard.
Well, the other thing before you go, I wanted to touch on, because I think England does this really well, is having communal transportation. So taking the bus, taking the train, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have, not everybody has to have a car for 1 or 2 people. You have, I remember in England, 10 people trying to get themselves in a Mini. Maybe that was another John Cleese thing. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
That was the Guinness Book of Records thing. How many people can you get in a Mini? And then you had to drive it. Then you had to drive it 10 yards, I think it was. But no, we are really quite fortunate in England with our public transport. You can get a train from a lot of, definitely from all major cities, but from quite a lot of towns, you can get a train, which are very good, touch wood, generally good. And buses are really very good. And funnily enough, I hate to tell you all this, but on Thursday, I become a pensioner and I get a bus pass. So I will be able to travel on a bus in England for nothing, because pensioners get a little plastic card, which is a bus pass, and they can travel on a bus for nothing. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I mean, all joking apart, the best thing we do in lots of cities is park and ride, where you park on the outskirts of the city and you get a bus to take you into the centre of the city, which makes a lot more sense because, who wants to drive in the middle of a city anyway? No. But also it makes it a lot safer for pedestrians in the middle of a city, and you get dropped off right in the middle. And that's absolutely perfect. So places like Cambridge and Oxford, Canterbury, they all have, park and ride. Edinburgh, all these places have park and ride. So you park on the outskirts and you get the public bus in. And most of them are double deckers, so you can get on the top deck of a
We
double
like the double decker, yeah. And when you get on the top on a sunny day, you have to have a Mr. Whippy. I had to say that. I had to say that or to bring that up. But Glenn, no, thank you so much, because I think that the public transportation thing is really good because it's cutting
Yes.
down the fumes, So,
Well,
so that is
kind of
fantastic.
talking about that, a lot of our buses in cities now are electric, so you don't even get diesel fumes.
Oh, wow.
Even
Okay.
double decker buses, some of them are electric already.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. That's amazing. Well, very cool. Very cool. Well, Glenn, I know we could talk for hours about sustainability and staying in old bed and breakfast. It's better than building a brand new one. It's
Exactly.
keeping history and these places alive. So, when we look at the word sustainable, I know we could talk about 100 things easily. So,
We hadn't better though, because we'd be running over.
I know. So, Glenn, thank you, everybody. Go to norfolk-tours.co.uk.
Bye.
So when we talk about sustainable tourism, we want to talk with Sharon K. Kurtz. She's a travel writer and an amazing photographer, and she travels the country, travels the world. And over the last year and a half or so, I have to say she must have had some amazing experiences that, going to destinations that understand ecotourism, and that includes being able to watch birds and wildlife while also understanding the need to preserve them, also learning about climate change, and also how to observe them as a good-minded person, so you don't encroach in their territory. But first, go to SharonKKurtz.com to keep up with her. She also has a podcast here on Big Blend Radio that airs every first Wednesday, where we talk about where she wandered around in the world. So, how are you doing, Sharon?
I'm very well. Thank you, Lisa.
Hey, this is so fun. We just recorded your episode about whale watching in Loreto in Baja Sur in Mexico. And, you saw blue and gray whales,
Yes.
and fin whales and dolphins.
Yes.
So one thing I wanted to touch on is here you get to see whales and everything, but a lot of times we want to know that this is done in a sustainable manner, yet at the same time, these whales are actually bringing tourism to the community, right?
Right. Loreto really has done it well. The Loreto Bay National Marine Park is an UNESCO site, and they take conservation and sustainability very seriously. There are serious rules. You cannot have too many boats out on the bay at a time. They have to be a small little boat.
Mm-hmm.
And they do everything they can to protect the whales. And this is their breeding ground and where they come back every year, and they want to keep it that way.
And at the same time, another part of the sustainable tourism mode is that it seems like they've kept Loreto very historic and not overrun as too commercial. They haven't gone commercial with their town.
It is the most wonderful little town. It was the capital of the Americas back in the 1800s. The Jesuits came in, and so there's beautiful, it's called a Magico town, and they have what's called the Malacan. So right by the water, there's this wonderful pathway with whale sculptures every so often where you can stroll. So I love Loreto. They've done a really good job. They don't want to be Baja. They don't want to be Los Cabos. They want to be a small little community.
Oh, like Cabo San Lucas? Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to be that.
Yeah, they want to be small, quaint, and authentic. But the other part is like you're even eating right from the sea. So the food is very local as well, right? So it's not being trucked in from across the country.
It is local. The fishermen actually bring the fish that they catch to the restaurants. The restaurants will plan them on their meals. And chocolate clams are a specialty. But even when we went, they had to, they're watching how many that they harvest. And sometimes they'll have a halt on them just to let them replenish themselves. So they're it's really the best, freshest food, and great margaritas as well.
Oh, well, that's important. That's all part of sustainable travel for sure. Well, we'll stay international, but let's go to Fiji was one of your recent destinations as well. And in Fiji, you're saying also they are also working to be very authentic and keep their culture and their heritage and their natural resources alive and strong, and that have that integrity, right?
Right. Well, Fiji is, we all drink Fiji water from the grocery store. Literally, it comes from Fiji, and it is just as clear and pure as that coming out of the oceans. So Fiji has 1,000 miles of coastline surrounding these 300 islands with soft coral, and the coral is what filters the water, and it's a living organism. So they have to keep those corals, and climate change is a big problem because as the water gets warmer, the corals die off. So one of my favorite things was going to it's called the Bula Reef. It is an UNESCO sanctioned project where out there in the waters, they take little baby corals and suspend them on ropes in the water and grow them up, and then use those baby corals to replenish reefs that are dying. So Bula is a big word in Fiji. It means life. It means welcome, come. And so they have in coral spelled out Bula, the biggest underwater word that there is. And maybe from a plane, you can look down and you can see this. So I went snorkeling right there with a marine biologist, and she told us all about how this works.
That's fantastic. So they're creating their own coral garden, basically.
Yes, exactly.
That's amazing.
It's a coral garden. Yep.
Well, they even talk about how wind energy out in the ocean. We've had people come on shows and talk about that. Where they put the cement, right? Put the big windmill thingies.
Yeah.
Coral actually starts to grow around the base of that. So it's people are worried, the destruction. But wind energy is healthy, as we know. So it's it's where you do it, how you do it, but they actually see that things start to grow on there, which is pretty cool to know about. So the other place I thought that was really should definitely be talked about is Slovenia. You went there last year, and this is an entire country that takes tourism. It's an important factor, but you must abide by their rules, and they're very green conscious, right? About sustainability.
Slovenia was one of my favorite destinations last year. The whole country is green. Forest, there's more forests than people. It's and they have to do things right there. They protect nature. So it was a beautiful country.
And they didn't have box stores and things like that.
No.
They're very uncommercial as well. And everything is about being eco-friendly.
Yes, exactly right. It's a whole mindset.
So the whole country is eco-friendly. That is wonderful when you hear that. I mean, it's a small country, but that's part of why they want to protect themselves, right? And so they understand that it's about protecting life. And as a traveler, we need to be conscious.
They want tourism. They want people to come and see how beautiful it is, but they want to control it. They don't want big tour buses. They don't want that kind of cruise tourism. And so I like how they've approached it.
Very light-footed. And that's a thing too. I think these places that you've been, and the last one I wanted to touch on is Port Aransas in Texas, not far from where you are in Austin. And Nancy and I, we've missed each other. My gosh, I can't believe it.
We were there the same day almost.
I mean, it's like we passed the ships in the night, and I love this because, when we look at tourism and where countries are doing this and taking a eco-friendly approach, they're teaching others. And I think Port Aransas did such a good job because this whole movement of saving the whooping crane actually started in Wisconsin. And I've actually seen them there. And it moved down to Texas because they migrate there.
They migrate, yes.
And we've got to see them, and you got to see them. And they have a festival, a birding festival. But again, it's monitored. It's not like everybody runs out and, gets in the way of the birds. And
right. Those birds
Yeah.
are amazing. They're like prehistoric animals. They have like a 5-foot wingspan. They're just gigantic. And it's just amazing that this is like one of the only places where they migrate to for the winter.
And you
then
get to
come
see
back.
them. And
Yes.
I mean, this is a beautiful area. We went to the Wildlife Refuge, Port Aransas National Wildlife Refuge. You went there by boat
Yes.
from
Yes.
Port Aransas. We went to Corpus Christi, Padre Island National Seashore. This whole area is also really good for sea turtles. And you got Corpus Christi there, and the aquarium there does a ton of rescue work for sea turtles. And they've been on our show before, a couple of years ago on our Nature Connection show. And I think they need, when they rescue because of climate change, they're looking up to 1,000 to 5,000 rescues at a time from the water getting cold. So, I love what they're doing at the aquarium there. And with this, but they also were talking about on the podcast that the water changing so much, they're starting to see manatees from Florida in Corpus Christi in that whole area, which, boaters and fishermen are not used to. So now the education component is about, watching what happens. So, we talk about, whales migrating, whales migrating, birds migrating. Climate change really messes with their migratory patterns. So,
Yeah.
I think these events like birding festivals and things like that really gets our eyes open to, number one, even know about like the whooping crane, because we,
Yes.
did we know beforehand,
Right.
about these, magnificent birds? Did we know the difference between blue and gray whales until you go somewhere, like
Right.
Loretto? So I think these are setting really good examples and also introducing us to all these different, forms of wildlife, all these different species we have and want to continue to have.
Well, we're so lucky that we can see these things, and we need to protect nature. We need to protect it around the world. And I feel like we're coming around. It's much more important in the 2020s than it was, like, let's just say 1950 or something. Now we know better. We're doing better.
Yeah, I hope so. And, and that's the thing, we can each, no matter what is happening in the world, whether it's a policy or not a policy, we can take action within our own neighborhood. We can take action wherever we go as being good travelers, and destinations, just adopting good practices, because it means that your community stays healthy and clean, and it's good for the locals as well. So thank you, Sharon. Always good to have you on the show.
It was a pleasure. I enjoy it every time.
Everyone go to SharonKkurtz.com. Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at BigBlendRadio.com.